The nervous unit. Start off with a. This is so pretty. The loss. Okay, so we have a model of a neuron here. So this is a multipolar neuron. So it's usually a motor neuron that's associated with that. So you have nissl bodies, you have a nucleus, nucleolus, you have terminal boutons, you have dendrites coming in, an axon leaving with an axon hillock. You have the membrane that covers this is the neural lemma. This is the Schwann sheath that's made up, the myelin sheath that's made up of Schwann cells, nucleus of a Schwann cell. You have mitochondria and specialized ribosomes that are producing proteins there. You have a connective tissue sheath, and that covers your multipolar neuron.
You have node of Ranvier?
I'm sorry, node of Ranvier. Okay? So that one was easy, right? Okay, functional units of the brain. So now we're looking at the areas of the brain that kind of do things, okay? So we have the prefrontal cortex, okay? We have the motor association, primary motor. We have primary somatic sensory, somatic association. Okay, and the colors here are roughly yellow, prefrontal. This is the larger areas are the association areas. So here, this is the somatic sensory association. Okay, here's primary somatic. Excuse me, this is motor. I'm sorry, motor association, primary motor. We have primary somatic sensory association. Then on the back here, you have visual association, primary visual. Okay? Then we take a look at the side here. You have brown is the primary taste. Association, taste is inside. You have auditory association. Primary auditory is this gray here. And you have the speech center or Broca center kind of in orange. The colors, this is my best brain, and the colors are a little bit weak on it. Okay?
So that's the one you're going to use?
Yeah. Okay. The other one's worse.
Would you do like a central sulcus or fissure on that model? Or
I would certainly say.
lobes?
I definitely could do lobes, like the occipital lobe, frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe. Okay. In terms of longitudinal sulcus, central sulcus, I could do those. Okay. On this model, you have a model of the spinal cord. I'm going to use this one, not the other one. Okay? So on this shows real clearly that you have a pia mater, subarachnoid space, then you have a arachnoid layer, and finally the dura mater on the outside, and then above it you have the epidural. Okay? We have a gray commissure with a central canal in it. We have the anterior and median fissure. We have a dorsal horn, lateral horn, ventral horn. Coming out of the dorsal horn, we have the dorsal root. Meets over here, we have the dorsal root ganglion. We have a parasympathetic ganglion here. Okay, we have the ventral roots meeting here. Let's see, what else?
You'd also accept sympathetic chain ganglion?
Yeah, sympathetic chain ganglion.
And parasympathetic are the same?
No, say what?
The parasympathetic ganglion and the chain?
No, totally different, because remember, for lecture, the only place that you see sympathetic ganglions are in the thoracolumbar region. We're in the thorax region. Okay. So this is a sympathetic ganglion. Okay? Do you know why you wouldn't see a parasympathetic ganglion here?
Is it originates?
Lumbar origins?
Cranial sacral origins.
Okay, it's cranial sacral origins, first of all. Yeah. But let's say this was a cervical or sacral's. Why else wouldn't you see the ganglion here? There's good reason. They're real close to the effector organ. The ganglions are close to the effector organ. Only on the sympathetic do you see it close to the spinal cord. And so we have the sympathetic chain ganglion just going in the thorax lumbar region, goes right next to the spinal cord, and they're little bumps.
I just for some reason remember you teaching us that those were the chain ganglion, but I must.
They are sympathetic chain ganglion, period.
They are?
Yes. Sympathetic only, though.
Right.
Not parasympathetic.
Okay.
That's when you said parasympathetic, I want to say there's a lot.
That's what you just said a moment ago. That's why I got confused.
Not rolling back the tape.
Oh, I was just going to say, roll back the tape. I was fine on
As long
that.
as we know that it's
Yeah,
which one is
sympathetic chain ganglion.
Yeah.
Ramus
Okay.
communicans here.
Ramus communicans is here. Okay, and it goes from those two areas, ramus communicans. On this sagittal section, okay, there is arachnoid villi up here. They're kind of hard to see, but they're in green. Oh, they're in green. Now they're purple. We have the falx cerebri is this connective tissue that's an extension of the dura mater. Okay. So we're not looking really at we're not really looking at brain. We're looking at the dura mater going between the two cerebral hemispheres. Okay? We take a look at this. This is the corpus callosum. Okay? This is the fornix posterior. This round piece of brown is the thalamus. There's a little bump on it, which is the intermediate mass, which connects both thalamus. Okay? We're also looking at the third ventricle right on top of this. It connects with the interventricular foramen right there. So if you follow that up, you would be into the lateral ventricle. That goes down the cerebral aqueduct, goes to the fourth ventricle, and out the central canal. We have a pineal gland here. We have a pituitary gland, anterior and posterior. The thalamus is this region right here. We have a pons. We have a medulla oblongata. We have the corpora quadrigemini. Top one is the superior colliculus, bottom one is the inferior colliculus. Arbor vitae, cerebellar cortex, again corpus callosum, cerebral cortex, frontal sinus. I think I'm okay with that. Okay, on the ear, okay, we have the external ear with the pinea, okay? We hit the tympanic membrane or the eardrum, okay? We have three ossicles. The one connected to the eardrum is the malleus, next one is the incus, next one is the stapes. When you look at the stapes, it's connected to the vestibule of the inner ear. So we have malleus, incus, and stapes of the inner ear, with an option to equalize the pressure through the eustachian tube or the pterotympanic tube. So that would equalize the pressure in the middle ear. There are some muscles that connect to these, like the stapedius, which are designed for protection. So when we take a look at the inner ear, we have a cochlea, we have a vestibule, and we have the semicircular canals. Most of this is involved in the cochlear nerve. So this is cranial nerve number 8, so it's a vestibular cochlear nerve. We have a small part that goes to the vestibule, large part that goes to the cochlea. Cochlea is hearing, the vestibule is position, acceleration, and balance. Okay? When we look at these semicircular canals, we have a superior one, we have an anterior one, we have an inferior one. Okay? So they're placed in 3 dimensions. So they mimic our 3 dimensions. Remember, there's crystals in there and hair cells that perceive that movement. So this is all mechanical. Going to the eye, on this eye here, you have a cornea, you have an anterior chamber, a posterior chamber, a lens goes here, we have the iris, we have a ciliary body, which is the circular muscle that controls the lens. We have the ora serrata, which is what we see from the inside of the iris. When we take a look at the layers of the eye, we have a retina, choroid, and retina, choroid, and sclera. Okay, where the optic nerve comes in, that's the optic disc. It's a blind spot. There's no rods and cones here. However, at this indentation, that's the fovea centralis, and we see a higher concentration of rods and cones here. So that is the fovea centralis. This doesn't show the macula lutea terrifically, but this one shows it a little bit better. Here we have the white spot on this one is the optic disc, the blind spot. Okay? So that's the optic nerve coming in there. Then next to it is a large pink spot. Okay, that's the macula lutea, and the little yellow spot in the middle is the fovea centralis. That's where we focus our image on. Okay? Again, we have retina, choroid. We're missing sclera. Sclera's there. We have ora serrata on this, pupil, iris, optic nerve. Here, anterior chamber, posterior chamber. This is a vitreous body. Okay, there's a canal of Schwann that connects the anterior and posterior chambers. That's what glaucoma checks. Okay, this is a blow up of the retina, and light is actually coming in. When we look at it, light goes through all of these layers and finally hits the rods and cones. This is the pigmented cell layer of the retina. Looks like choroid, but it's still in the retina. It's a thin layer. Has rods and cones on it. Has these cells are what support that. It has bipolar cells, and then finally it has ganglion cells out here. So all of those cells, the light comes through all of this, stimulates these, sends a signal back out. Usually a rod is connected to one nerve, several rods are connected to one nerve fiber, so that it actually does a better job of picking up low light conditions. On this eye, we take a look at this eye, the nerve always goes towards the medial direction. So this happens to be a right eye. And so we have a medial rectus, lateral rectus, inferior rectus, superior rectus, inferior oblique, and there's a superior oblique on top. Those are controlled by which cranial nerves? 3. 6. Actually, abducens is 6. I was thinking 4 trochlear. So 3, 4, and 6. Extrinsic muscles of the eye. Okay, intrinsic muscles of the eye also piggyback on those. Okay, because remember 2. What do you know about cranial nerve number 2 that makes it really unique?
Sensory only.
That means information is only going that direction. So there's no glands, no smooth muscle, nothing that goes on optic nerve. On 3, we have both skeletal muscle and smooth muscle and autonomic muscles going. Okay, so on this here, we have a cross-section through the cochlea. So this is the tympanic membrane, makes up the scala tympani. Okay, here's the scala media, here's the scala tympani. Okay, this is also called Reiser's membrane. This is the tectorial membrane. This is the basilar membrane.
Can you go over those one more time?
Sure.
Both of those were scalars.
Oh, I don't know. What did I say? Okay. So here we have the tympanic, here we have the vestibular membrane. My mistake. Vestibular membrane. Scala vestibuli. Okay? Scala media, scala tympani. There you go. Okay, I was getting mixed up with the tympanic membrane there. So vestibular membrane, and so this is the scala vestibuli. Scala media, scala tympani. Tectorial membrane, basilar membrane. We have inner and outer hair cells. They have spiral ganglion cells out here connecting them. These happen to be the bipolar cells that connect those to that. Usually bipolar cells are always associated with sensory information. Bony labyrinth surrounding this whole thing. Okay. On this, you have a cochlea here, and you almost can look pretty closely. You see the vestibular membrane, you see the scala vestibuli, scala media, scala tympani. So you see all of that. You see the cochlear nerve, you see the vestibular nerve. We see an endolymphatic duct, endolymphatic sac with the utricle. Here you have the saccule. These just contain fluid in the semicircular canals. This actually sits in the head like this, so that you have a superior, you have an inferior, and I have a lateral. Okay, so it does 3 dimensions. One sticks up, one sticks down, and one is flat. Okay?
That's how you want to answer it on quick semicircular canal, or to have superior, inferior, lateral?
If I point to one, you're going to give me which one it is.
Okay.
Okay? So, because they do the 3 dimensions and when they're positioned. If I'm going to ask that, I'll probably position it that way. Okay, in there, just so you have some reference point. It's a little harder with this one here. That one you have a reference point, which one's sticking up, which one's sticking down, and which one's flat. Okay? So, that is your kind of sensory stuff. Okay?
Can you name these?
Those bones?
Yeah.
The stapes looks like a stirrup. I got that one. The other 2, is it critical?
Malleus?
Oh yeah, the malleus goes against the tympanic membrane. Okay, and then this is the incus. So you have malleus, incus, and stapes. They kind of come together like that. Okay, so the malleus goes against the tympanic membrane. That's the muscle that actually connects it to the tympanic membrane. And this one just vibrates in the middle. These amplify the sound waves. Okay, so 6 oscilles that we didn't do with the skeletal system. Okay, so they make the vibration bigger. Eardrum vibrates like this. By the time they get to the oval window, they're going three times the amplitude. Okay, so now we can go to cardiovascular. All right, I think cardiovascular is really important. So I don't want to say it's heavily heavy on the heart. That's for sure. Okay, just because I think on this natural heart, you should know 4 chambers, 4 valves, all the vessels that kind of go to this. So when we look at this, the left side has a thicker wall, the right side has a thinner wall. So we have a right atria, right ventricle. We have a left atria, left ventricle. We have atrioventricular valves. The one on the right side is the tricuspid, one on the left side is a mitral valve. When we take a look at the right atria, it has a superior vena cava coming into it, an inferior vena cava coming into it, and a coronary sinus. So 3 things are draining into that right atria. It's blue blood. It goes through the tricuspid valve, goes into the right ventricle. In the right ventricle, we have trabecular carne, and we have papillary muscles supporting the atrioventricular valve. Okay? Blood goes up and out through the pulmonary trunk. It goes through the pulmonic semilunar valve. These go to pulmonary arteries, and those are going to feed the lungs with blue blood. The oxygenated blood comes back to the heart via the pulmonary veins. Pulmonary veins go into the left atria. They go into the left atria. The left atria then goes through the mitral valve, goes into the left ventricle. Again, trabecular carne and papillary muscles. We have chordae tendineae supporting those valves. Goes up and out through the aorta. The first branches off the aorta are left and right coronary arteries. Okay? The left coronary artery goes to the anterior interventricular one that goes between the two. And when you look at the right, that goes to your posterior interventricular artery. Okay? There's also a circumflex on that also, so those are feeding the heart. When blood goes out through the aorta, it goes through the aortic arch. We look for the for something. Ligamentum arteriosum is this white thing, which is the connection in atrial blood. Okay? So there's a white ligamentum arteriosum. First branches, again, are the coronary arteries, left and right, left side to the left heart, right side to the right heart. Brachiocephalic artery is going to go up and feed right head, right arm. So it's going to split into the right common carotid and the right subclavian. Hasn't done so yet. Next one going up is the left common carotid. The next one is the left subclavian. Then we go into the descending aorta to talk about more. This shows the azygos coming in the backside of the superior vena cava. This also shows the fossa ovalis, which is right there.
Where does the azygos come from?
The azygos comes from the mediastinum.
Okay.
Drains blood from the mediastinum. Okay? This model is a great model for showing mesenteric blood flow, but it's not color-coded correctly or as all the other models are. So when we take a look at this, obviously it has all of the other blood flow. But when we look at this here, what's kind of important is we notice that, first of all, we have a superior mesenteric artery coming off. Okay, the celiac trunk is somewhere up here. It goes to the splenic, gastric, hepatic arteries. We come down a little further, we see that here is the superior mesenteric artery. Okay, it goes down, feeds parts of this. It comes back up via this. So this is the superior mesenteric vein coming up. The inferior mesenteric artery is coming off here, and the inferior mesenteric vein is coming up alongside of it. Okay, all of these come together and they form the hepatic portal vein. So they have the splenic vein, the gastric vein coming all together, and they form the hepatic portal vein, which we normally see in purple. It goes to the liver, as does the hepatic artery. Okay, so that goes to our liver model, which it's somewhere else. Okay, we go to our liver model. That feeds the hepatocytes. Blood is drained into the inferior vena cava via the hepatic veins. So we have hepatic portal vein, hepatic artery, hepatic portal vein. Splenic artery, splenic vein, renal artery, renal vein. Doesn't show gonadal arteries on here, but it shows them. That part is really good for this model. Okay, this model here is really good because it splits some of this stuff up. Okay, we have the aortic arch coming up. The first branch comes up and it splits into the right common carotid and right subclavian. The next branch off, I got it turned a little bit, right here. This is your brachiocephalic artery. It goes into the right subclavian and right common carotid. The next branch is going to be the left common carotid and left subclavian. So that shows that really well. When you take a look at the superior vena cava, That's the superior vena cava. This first section of this, the first section of this superior vena cava is going to be the right brachiocephalic vein. Okay? This section is going to be the left brachiocephalic vein. When they split up, they go into the common jugular or the jugular, and they go into the right subclavian vein. Right subclavian vein, right jugular. Okay? When they come together, that short segment there is going to be brachiocephalic vein. So we have a right and left brachiocephalic vein that come together and make the superior vena cava. Okay? So that part of this upper part is kind of, there's the azygos. That upper part on this model is critical. Okay? The rest of this kind of shows all of the same stuff as we see in the other heart. I have to look for a moment. That little tiny spot is actually the coronary sinus because I'm following it from this side. This spot here is the fossa ovalis. Okay? I don't see a ligamentum arteriosum on this. Okay? But it shows up on the other heart real well. Okay? More of the same on the natural heart. On the lymphatic system, what we have to look for is the thoracic ducts on this. Okay, we talked a little bit about the lymphatic system today. You can see a lymph fluid coming up here, makes a bend, and it goes into the left subclavian vein. That's the thoracic duct. You have one on the other side coming up, but these drain lymph fluid here. This expansion under here in the digestive system is a cisterna chylae, and we have regional lymph nodes. We have inguinal, we have cervical, axillary, okay, intestinal. So we have regional lymph nodes that are draining fluid and screening it for pathogens. Okay? So the cisterna chylae is right underneath there, that expansion that my finger's on, okay, and the thoracic duct up there.
Is it white?
Mm-hmm. And there's a teal one right about there. On that model right there, there's a teal one right, I'm pointing right at it.
That's the thoracic duct.
Yeah, that's a thoracic duct, and it's teal, and it comes over into the right subclavian. So it's right about there. You'll see it's teal colored.
So I take it there's a chance you might use that model.
Yeah. Because that model shows the lymphatic duct, the thoracic duct really well. Okay? Respiratory system. Yeah, respiratory. Okay, on the respiratory system, you have the nasal cavity with turbinates. You have a superior, middle, and inferior nasal turbinate. Okay? You have a uvula. We have hard palate, soft palate, uvula. We have lingual tonsils. We have pharyngeal tonsils and palatine tonsils.
Where are the pharyngeal ones?
Pharyngeals, right there.
Those are palatine, right?
Palatine.
Wait.
Palatine, pharyngeal, and lingual tonsils. Okay? Palatine, pharyngeal, lingual tonsils.
I think, isn't the palatine behind? No,
That's the pharyngeal, right?
One. And the palatine's the lower one?
This should be, this isn't your palatine here.
No.
This is pharyngeal.
Oh.
Yeah, this should be your pharyngeal.
This is by the pharynx.
It's right in the pharynx. Okay? This is your lingual, this is your palatine tonsils. This is the opening to the eustachian tube. I have the epiglottis. I have the esophagus going down posteriorly. I have a trachea. This is the cricoid cartilage. The thyroid cartilage has been cut away so that if we were looking at something like this here, if we're looking at something like that, here is the actual thyroid cartilage, here is the cricoid cartilage. So this is cricoid, that's thyroid. The thyroid's been cut away. So here the large one is the thyroid, the one below it is the cricoid. If we look at the posterior segment on one of these, I have the wrong pieces. The little tiny one at the top is a corniculate, and the one coming up to it underneath this muscle is the arachnoid.
Can you show the corniculate again, please?
Corniculate is this one, this little tiny one at the top.
Thank you.
Okay, corniculate, arachnoid. When we're looking at this here, we have epiglottis. This is the cricoid. That's the thyroid. Cricoid, thyroid. Okay. When we come around, the cricoid gets large in the back, so that's cricoid. The thyroid cartilage doesn't even go in the back. So thyroid cartilage, epiglottis, corniculate, and underneath this muscle is the arachnoid, which I don't. There's another model that shows it. Okay. On the lungs, we have 3 lobes on the right lung. So when we look at this, we have superior, middle, and inferior lobe. We have a superior and inferior lobe here. We take a look at this. We have the diaphragm. We have trachea with respiratory epithelium. We have an esophagus behind it. When we look at the vessels in the heart here, we come down the trachea. We hit the carina. We hit primary bronchioles. They split again. We get secondary. They split again. They get tertiary. So they split out here. We look at the red vessels. What are they?
Veins.
Good, veins, okay, and the blue ones are going to be the arteries, okay? Looking inside here, you have the glottis, which is the actual space. We have the primary vocal folds and the false vocal folds above it. Some one of these has, what's that gland?
Thyroid.
Okay.
Are you going to ask the pharynxes on here? The 3 levels of pharynx?
Yeah, let's just say, this is essentially, up here we have the nasopharynx, okay? Directly behind the mouth we have oropharynx, and when we have a union of food, then we have the oropharynx, laryngeal pharynx right here. Okay? Yeah. Something just came to mind. I thought it was uvula. I think I'm okay. More than filtered there. Oh. We've been arguing
model?
about this model. No, okay, on this model, we're looking at essentially a terminal bronchiole, okay? The blue is cartilage, so it helps support it, okay? There is also these little pink bands are smooth muscle, okay? So we have smooth muscle, we have blue cartilage, we have respiratory epithelium that lines it, okay? Because this isn't a diffusion membrane. This is still trying to keep shit out of it, okay? So we have ciliated and mucus-secreting cells. So this is respiratory epithelium, cartilage, mucus glands, smooth muscle, which are these little bands, and again, anything blue is artery, anything red is a vein, okay? And then we have bronchi. Now, where I do have some issues with this one is when we're talking about terminal and different alveoli, I'm not sure we're really, I think this is probably a terminal bronchiole. Okay? This is a tube. It's the last of the bronchiole. Okay? It still has smooth muscle, so it's a terminal bronchiole. When we talk about respiratory bronchioles, it means there's like some alveoli along the tube here. These great things are alveoli. I'm fine with that. The pleural epithelium is what lines the cavity. This is visceral epithelium. Okay? That lines the organ. And that's about what I would ask on that.
The entire thing is an alveolar sac.
This is the whole thing is an alveolar sac. Okay.
The whole thing,
So
not that little exploded
this
thing right
whole
there.
thing is surrounded, like they come in globules. That's not an alveolar sac. Okay. That's a terminal alveoli where they end with a bunch of bubbles. So that it's a really detailed model, but there's only a couple things I like on it. Okay, so I like that you understand that this is a bronchiole, has cartilage, has respiratory epithelium in it, has smooth muscle. That's what's critical. Here we don't have smooth muscle, we just have blood vessels. Okay, when you see smooth muscle, you're in some kind of bronchiole. There should be no smooth muscles around the alveolar sacs. Okay, but capillary beds around the alveolar sac. Digestive. This model is real important, just like a kidney model, because everything's on here. It does does pretty much all the respiratory stuff for the upper respiratory tract. You have esophagus coming down. You have cardiac sphincter. Okay. We have the stomach come into the pylorus, so you have the main body. You have the cardia, the fundus, body, pylorus. We go through the pyloric sphincter. We go into the duodenum. The duodenum is kind of short. The duodenum has the hepatopancreatic ampulla. So we have bile stuff coming in. We have pancreatic enzymes coming into the duodenum. The duodenum has plicae circularis. These are the folds here. When we take a look at any part of this, this has a serosa, a muscularis externa, a submucosa, and a mucosa. We're looking at the mucosa. We're looking at the liver here. The liver has a gallbladder. This is when we look at what comes out of the gallbladder, it's going to be a cystic duct. This goes to the primary bile duct, and that's going to come down here and go into this hepatopancreatic ampulla. Here we have a spleen. We go into jejunum somewhere in here. Finally, we end up with ilium for sure there because it's connecting to the cecum. So this is ilium. I don't know about there. So that's definitely ilium. It goes to the ileocecal valve, goes into the cecum. Cecum has the appendix, which is that cul-de-sac down here. This is the ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon. This is the hepatic or right flexure. This is the splenic or left flexure. We make an S curve here, the sigmoid colon. Finally, into the muscular rectum, which is the storage sac. We have Taenia coli, Hostra, Cecae plicae circularis, Rugae.
Could you point out the Taenia coli one more time? Thank you.
And one more time, the Taenia coli is right here. If you look carefully, the Taenia coli is this banded here. It means tapeworm in Latin, so this is the Taenia coli. So if you're following along on this video, notice here we have the Taenia coli on the large intestine, following through to the right colic flexure and going down here, Taenia coli still. So we have a Taenia coli on the anterior and posterior portion.
Where was the Taenia
it's a band
coli?
of smooth muscle, and Taenia coli means tapeworm in Latin. And, you know, if you want to see other examples of Taenia coli, here is Taenia coli here, too.
Taenia coli is going to kill my battery.
I don't know what else I can say about Taenia coli. I can put the purple laser on the Taenia. There, you know, there's the Taenia coli. Okay, so
If you
this
ask
model,
that and we get it wrong, there's a problem.
this model is really kind of a good model. Okay, this spleen model is pretty good too, so make sure and take a look at this one, because when we take a look at this spleen model, just surprisingly there's some stuff on it. Okay, first of all, this has a fantastic celiac trunk. That's coming off the descending aorta. It splits into a splenic artery, a hepatic artery, a gastric artery. Okay, so we see the hepatic portal vein going up to the liver with the hepatic artery. Okay, coming from the liver is the common bile duct. Okay, so that's celiac trunk. There's a vessel that's really high up here. This is the superior mesenteric artery. It's coming off and going down. The vessel going alongside of it is the superior mesenteric vein. Okay? That's coming up to feed the hepatic portal vein. That makes this the inferior mesenteric vein. We don't see the inferior mesenteric artery because it's down lower, but we do see the splenic vein. They're all coming together to form the hepatic portal vein. So we have celiac trunk, splenic artery, gastric artery, hepatic artery. We have, I forgot what I've given you, the duct of Wirsung?
Yes.
Okay, duct of Santorini and duct of Wirsung. Those are the primary and accessory ducts of the pancreas. Okay, along with the common bile duct, that would make the hepatopancreatic ampulla, which isn't that clear on here. This obviously has to be the duodenum and the spleen. But the blood flow on this is fair. Okay? The blood flow on this is fair. So you're thinking celiac trunk, that's got to be the superior mesenteric artery. Inferior mesenteric artery doesn't show, but the inferior mesenteric vein does show, and the superior mesenteric vein is coming up there. They all come together and form the hepatic portal vein. Okay? So we have a hepatic artery, hepatic portal vein, and common bile duct draining. We don't see the hepatic vein because we don't see the liver. If we take a look at the liver, we have really three blood flows to this liver. Okay? So we take a look at this. We have a hepatic artery going in. We have a hepatic portal vein going in. Okay? We have a common bile duct coming out. Draining the gallbladder is the cystic duct. We have a left and right coming together, left and right bile ducts. They all come together to form the common bile duct. Okay? Now, blood draining the liver is going to drain through the hepatic veins. It's going to go into the inferior vena cava. So we're looking at all of this blue blood is draining the sinusoids. So what we do is we put hepatic portal vein in the sinusoids or spaces over there. So next to the hepatic artery over there is the hepatic portal vein. It dumps the blood into the sinuses and mixes all of that blood and then collects it at the other side in the hepatic vein. And then it returns it to the inferior vena cava. So on the right side, we're delivering blood to the hepatocytes. On the left side, we're collecting it from the hepatocytes. Okay? We have the ligamentum, ligamentum venosum. That would be the vein from the umbilical cord. Is going to be actually the remnant of it.
Falciform ligament?
Yep. We have the right lobe, we have the left lobe, we have the caudate lobe, and we have the quadrate lobe and the caudate lobe. Caudate, quadrate, left and right lobe of the liver. Okay? And
Coronary ligament?
coronary ligament is across here. Okay? And the most important thing is just recognizing that the umbilical vein, this is going right up to the inferior vena cava. So when we look at blood being drained from the fetus, this is the remnant of that. Okay? So how does the fetus get blood? I'm writing a question on that one right now. How does the fetus get blood?
The placenta.
Where's the umbilical cord get the blood? Blood going away from the fetus to get oxygenated. Where does it come from? It's going away from the fetus. So would you use a vein or an artery? It's going away from the... Okay, so we'd use an artery because we want it to be pressurized. Okay, want it to be pressurized. So that's coming from the femoral arteries. Okay, or excuse me, the iliac arteries. So the iliac arteries are delivering blood to the placenta, 2 of them. Okay, what color's the blood? Okay, so in the adult, that would normally be red blood. This is as blue as it gets in the fetus, so it is blue. We, with due respect, realize the fetus isn't under the same respiratory loads we are, so blue and red is not the same meaning as it is in an adult, but that's as deoxygenated as the blood gets. Goes to the placenta, picks up oxygen, comes back the umbilical vein. It's red as the red can get. It comes up, and where's it going?
To the heart.
First.
The liver?
Inferior vena cava?
Okay, what color is the blood in the inferior vena cava normally?
Blue.
Okay, now what color is it?
Red.
Okay, or at least quite red. We're still receiving deoxygenated blood from the lower limbs, but we're mixing it with bright red blood from the placenta. So the blood coming into the right atria is normally all blue. Now we have all of this purple blood coming into the right atria. In fact, when we look at the blood at the right atria, how would you describe the blood in the right atria of an adult?
Yeah.
Totally deoxygenated. That's as spent as it gets. In the fetus, it's not even nearly that. It's the most oxygenated blood. Okay? Well, I was splitting hairs on that question. Okay. What we find in the inferior vena cava is by far the most oxygenated blood. When you mix it with the superior vena cava, then all of a sudden you've kind of toned it down a little bit. So I definitely want you to think the right atria is containing purple blood, when in the adult it's totally blue blood.
You want to do the hepatocytes real quick?
This is hepatocytes.
Biochemical.
So on this model, hepatic artery, hepatic portal vein, they're delivering blood to these sinuses. We have, I don't know that this model represents it well, but you know, if you look at a slide, they're just bands of hepatocytes, and you just drain blood past them all so that they can all work on the blood. So you have these cords of hepatocytes, each one of them doing work on the blood. We mix the hepatic arterial blood and we mix the hepatic portal vein blood. It goes into these sinuses, which are just spaces, essentially. We're just draining the blood in the spaces so that the hepatocytes have time to work on the blood. We're not moving the blood fast. Each hepatocyte is producing bile. It goes down through the bile caniculi and be connected into the bile duct. You know, there's some macrophages here that are called Kupfner cells. I don't know if they're represented real well. Don't worry about it.
What would you ask for sinusoids?
Any of these spaces. I don't care if you point to the blue or the space.
Okay.
Okay? This is the hepatic vein. This is where we're collecting the blood. We're sending it back to the body. Yeah, I'm not sure what there's macrophages. I don't know if they intended these to look like the macrophages. These certainly aren't the macrophages. So, those are called Kupfner cells, but that's fine. This is the mucosa, submucosa, muscularis externa, and serosa. So we have villi. They're made up of columnar cells that have microvilli. Okay? Blue is goblet cells. We have a lacteal. We have an arteriole, a venule going up each villi. In between each villi, we have a cryptolibrecon that has intestinal pits, and those secrete enzymes. Goblet cells throughout. We have a Peyer's patch, which is a lymph node. We have a duodenal gland on this side here. The duodenal gland secretes mucus into the cryptolibrecon. We have the submucosa, which has we have a muscularis mucosa right there, a thin layer of muscle. We have a submucosa that contains the lymph gland, the glands and the lymph nodes. It has also a mesenteric plexus, so it's controlling some of these nerve fibers and glands. So we have to have some nerve fibers here. Arterioles and venules. We get to the muscularis externa. You have a circular and a longitudinal. The stomach has one more interior one, which is the oblique. Again, muscles have to control this, mostly the parasympathetic. We get to the serosa, which is out on the outside. I think you should call all of this myenteric nerve plexus. Okay? This happens to be parasympathetic. That's what dominates the peristalsis and segmentation. Which one does peristalsis?
The longitudinal.
Excellent. Longitudinal. Segmentation is a circle. Okay, so you want any tooth questions? I wasn't going to do any tooth questions. I don't think so. You guys want to know what premolars are or molars or something like that?
Not if they're not on the exam.
No, I don't have enough room for teeth questions. I think urinary system up over here. Sorry, urinary system. This model becomes really important here. This model with the goes down from the gross kidney all the way down to the microscopic glomerulus. Okay? So on the kidney, you have a capsule, you have a cortex, and you have a medulla, you have a pelvis, and comes out the ureter. So on the capsule, that's the connective tissue sheath on the outside. The cortex contains the glomeruli, or the little round things. The medulla, the renal pyramids, are these things here that contain the loop of Henle, and collecting tubules and calyxes are in this renal pelvis, and then finally out the ureter. We have a renal artery, renal vein. Splits into a segmental artery, segmental vein. Goes into an interlobar artery and vein. Goes to an arcuate artery and vein. Goes to an interlobular artery and vein. We're over here. When we go into an interlobular artery, it splits into an afferent arteriole, which goes into the glomerulus. Efferent arteriole goes out, and then it goes to some peritubular capillaries. Okay? A portion of this can also go to the vasa recta, which modifies the blood or the tissue in the renal medulla. So that's blood flow. Capsule, cortex, medulla. When we take a look at the glomerulus, is this tuft of capillaries. It has a glomerular epithelium lining it. We have a visceral epithelium lining it. We have a parietal epithelium which lines Bowman capsule. This is Bowman's capsule. Connected to it has to be the PCT. This is the DCT with the macula densa, and next to it we have some juxtaglomerular cells. Together they make the juxtaglomerular apparatus. Afferent arteriole, efferent arteriole, glomerulus, which is fenestrated capillaries that leak. This is a brush border of the PCT, and that's the macula densa of the DCT. When you take a look at this model, you do see PCT, descending loop of Henle, ascending loop of Henle, DCT, and collecting tubule. Okay? This is the glomerular model. Again, it shows visceral epithelium lining the glomerulus, parietal epithelium lining Bowman's capsule. We have a PCT leaving, PCT by it. We have DCT with the macula densa. We have yellow juxtaglomerular cells on the afferent arteriole. Here's the efferent arteriole. Thin loop of Henle, DCT, PCT, collecting tubule, more PCT. Following this shows you cortex and medulla. So on this we have a glomeruli. The glomeruli all have a larger afferent arteriole going inside, efferent leaving. The efferent is going to go and feed the peritubular capillaries. goes to the glomerulus. From the glomerulus, we go into the tan PCT. We go down a loop of Henle, so let's choose this one. So we have a loop of Henle in the medulla, descending loop, ascending loop. We go up to the purple DCT and finally to the collecting tubule and out through the calyxes. We have a vasorectal blood flow extending from the interlobular arteries, which is the same here. From the interlobular arteries, we have a blood flow going into the medulla, which is a vasorecta. Over there. All your quiz questions. On the female, you have an ovary, you have fimbriae, you have an infundibulum, we have the fallopian tube. Leaving the ovary is the ovarian ligament. Here we have the ureter going down the posterior side. We have the round ligament here, and we have the broad suspensory ligament supporting all of that area of the uterus. Here we have the uterus with the parametrium, myometrium, endometrium. We have the cervix, we have the vagina. We have the clitoris, we have labia minora, labia majora, pubic symphysis. We have the bladder with the urethra, and we should have a ureter coming down and connecting with the bladder. Here we have the rectum, and that's good. But if we were looking at this outside, then we have to look at it more carefully. Here we have bladder with the ureter coming in. We have urethra leaving. We have clitoris, labia minora on this model. We have muscular rectum with anus here. We have vagina. We have uterus. We have fallopian tube. We have ovarian ligament posterior, round ligament anterior, and da-da-da, and pubic symphysis.
The broad ligament?
Broad ligament is sliced right here, this line. On the male, we have a ureter coming down. It's going to enter the bladder. We have an epididymis, testes. We have the spermatic cord. We have the spermatic cord coming up and over. So when we're taking a look at this part of the model, we see that we have the vas deferens coming around the back. We have a ureter coming in that's kind of broken. Okay? We have a seminal vesicle and the prostate, and we see that we have the rectum. Okay? So we have testes, epididymis, spermatic cord coming over, vas deferens here, ureter here, seminal vesicle here, prostate here.
Scrotum.
Scrotum on the outside here. Here we have the corpora cavernosum. Here we have the corpora spongiosum. Here we have the glands of the penis. Okay? If we flip this over, we are looking at the ampulla of the vas deferens here. So that's part of this. We have the seminal vesicle coming together. Together they enter the ejaculatory duct. They are coming into the prostatic urethra. The prostate secretes into the prostatic urethra. The vas deferens and seminal vesicle go into the ejaculatory duct. From the prostatic urethra, we go to the penile urethra and out. So this piece is complicated, so you have to look at that piece carefully. Here we have a placenta, we have endometrium, myometrium, perimetrium. We have an ovary, we have fimbriae, we have fallopian tube. We have an ovarian ligament connected to the ovary, and we have a round ligament there. Okay?
Amnion.
We have a cervix here. The amnion is this layer there. We have the cervix here, and we have vagina here. Infundibulum is that expansion of that just goes before the finger-like projection.
Trying to find a baby.
No, I was looking at this one going, there's two umbilical arteries and one umbilical vein. The umbilical arteries are blue and a little hard to see. I'd probably go for a little bigger one, but you can see it. So, okay?
All right. That's it.
So, however many questions, I don't know. I mean, I'll